symbols of something. And like here's would be the symbol of the eagle in 19:4. He says, "Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself." So, and that's when, you know, one of the four in the book of Revelations talk about they had a calf, an eagle, one looked like had a face of a man. So what did the eagle represent here was, he said, look what I did to the Egyptians, right? Mm-hmm. So when he brought him out of the bondage of Egypt, he put him on eagle's wings, he's saying, and brought you to myself. That's represented the eagle. So what happened when he brought him out of Egypt? He brought him out of bondage. So that that eagle starts represents you be taken out of bondage. Because the word for church, the word for church is ecclesia, and it means called out ones in the Greek. Yes. So the church is really called out ones.
Yes.
Called out of what? Called out of Egypt, called out of Babylon, called out of man. Mm-hmm. But when we read this in 19:4, we see that it was brought to myself. He says, "Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then shall you be a peculiar treasure unto me above all the people. For all the earth is mine." Notice that. He said, "Therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then shall you be a peculiar treasure unto him." Remember, he said he hid this treasure in earthen vessels in the New Testament? Mm-hmm. So the covenant is being established through coming out of the Egypt, and that's where the eagle is in here, and then all these symbols are all symbols. Because remember, it's gonna, when we get into 5:1, it's going to talk about within. We'll kind of go back over that when we get there. But in verse 6, he said, after he said he says, "You'll be my treasure unto me above all the people, for all the earth is mine, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel." So it's a spirit. He's not just making Levites the king. This is talking about that spiritual kingdom. He'll make the whole nation a kingdom. So that eagle's wings represents the coming out of bondage. That's how God brought you out, put you on eagle's wings, and brought you into himself. So let's go to the book of Revelation, 5th chapter. We'll start at verse 1. We'll just backtrack the whole 5th chapter. So this book is probably the widely most misunderstood book out of the New Testament. And maybe that's not right, but for the extremes that man has taken it to, it is. Because man doesn't understand, and then they take it into all kinds of places, as we know. I got a newsletter, and I didn't have a copy machine. I got a great newsletter from Scott Paris, and it was based all on church history. And I wanted to bring it to make copies because I wanted to give it to everybody, and it's called "Where Did the Pastor Come From?" And it's a historical reference how the church adopted and what they have made the pastor to be since 1600.
Wow. Well, we can print it online.
No, we need to make, because I got a newsletter, I got to make copies. Yeah, so we got to make copies. And I don't have a copy machine. And
I've got 10 pages.
It's 10 pages. Yeah, it's 5 back-to-backs.
Okay.
Scott, and that's one thing we needed to do is that, because I get a newsletter from Scott every month, and I was thinking, God, I got to make these newsletters and make copies and bring them to give them to you guys.
Oh, yeah, that would be wonderful.
But, because he sends one out every month. And what we could maybe do is, if you'd think about this, Marissa, if we could maybe take people's names and addresses down if they would be interested in, send it to him and see if he wants to send everybody their own.
Yeah.
We could do that, or we can just start making copies.
Yeah.
But because he sends them all over the place. those who want them and stuff. So, but anyways, it's really nice. It's a historical breakdown. Usually his is all about spiritual and the Word, but this one was all church history. 10 pages breaking down from Martin Luther to the other Protestants, how the clergy and the Catholic Church all gave all the priests the rights. They were the chosen to God. That the laity didn't have that power, And then it shows how really the Protestants really did it in a different way. The Protestants didn't believe like the Catholics, but they kept the clergy the same. That everything, even though they believed everybody was a priesthood, they didn't let the body operate as a body. They still said you had to be the chosen and you had to be ordained to be a minister. Now you could give the sacraments and you could deliver the word. And if you weren't that, you really weren't in that chosen realm. So it really didn't keep it into a body ministry. It kept it still. You have the laity. Remember the Church of Laodicea we talked about? Mm-hmm. Janet said it right. Was the laity keeps itself here and it keeps the other members here. And that's not how the church operated. He even went into ordination in the first century church wasn't, I didn't say, okay, Marissa, you're ordained to be a pastor. Now she is. Her fruits would show that that's her calling before that ever happened. God would ordain her and it just would be acknowledged. Because you would see that. Would be evident because they're already doing it. In a certain extent. You would already see that. And that's what the ordination of the first century church did. Where they made it laity clergy thing. And it was broke down really well, 10 pages of it showing even, there was a group, I think in the 1600s called the Anabaptists. Have you ever heard of them?
No.
And the Anabaptists started having body ministry, where they were saying, everybody, if you have a word from God, you bring it forth, not just clergy here and everybody here. And Martin Luther spoke up against it and says that anybody who believes in this and participates in this needs to be put to death.
Wow. Talk about control.
So Scott said, so even you see, this is our Protestants, this is your leader, Protestant. Scott breaks that down after the statement was made by him. And he's got all the historical references when he put it together. And he said, so here's the Protestants, and Martin Luther's the one who came out of the Catholic Church, but yet he's saying these people need to be put to death because they're allowing a body ministry to happen within the church. They were called Anabaptists.
They still want authority.
So he just showed how maybe they changed. The only thing that they changed differently is they didn't when Protestants broke out with Catholics, Protestants didn't teach that you go to them to get your sins taken away. But they still kept the clergy falsehoods, of the same as the Catholic Church. That they have the power. They were the mediators. Because what happened was they'd be the educated ones, and the regular body or the churches would end up being people who are non-educated, and they would keep them under their thumb. Still, even though they weren't Catholics, they had left the Catholicism, but they kept 90% of it still. And it breaks down. It's a good newsletter. I just read a lot of information in it, and I wanted to make copies and get you guys if you guys wanted to look at it.
Yeah, it's interesting how he's doing that, and that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But as you guys are seeing, that the book of this book is the whole New Testament